Hi there, esteemed audience, and welcome to another episode of Middle Grade Ninja. I'm your host, Rob Kent. As you know, I'm the author of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees, which is available as a paperback, an audiobook, and the ebook is free. Free to download whenever you're watching or listening to this, wherever fine ebooks are sold. Get hooked on the series. Come see me with money for books 2 and 3. There's no time. My God, we've got at least 3 authors here tonight. We got to get right into this. My guest is none other than author A. Deborah Baker, who is also author Myra Grant, who is also author Seanan McGuire, and probably a couple of pen names that aren't public knowledge, yeah?
Yep.
Esteemed audience knows that I never summarize anybody else's biography or anybody else's book, because that's just a terrible way to start the show, is to make you listen to me describe you. So if you would give esteemed audience kind of an overview of your background, and we'll go from there.
Hello, I am Seanan McGuire. I also write as A. Deborah Baker, who is a middle grade author, which is why I'm relevant to you at all. And my background is I dual majored in folklore and herpetology at the University of California, Berkeley, go Bears. And that qualifies me to basically either sell French fries or write books about dragons. And I opted for the dragons.
So I had seen that you had originally, well, I don't know where you started, but I know at age 12 you were doing stand-up comedy.
That is correct. I had severe social anxiety as a child. I'm still not super comfortable with people in unscripted situations, but I was very anxious. I didn't like people. I was the weird little fat girl. And part of what my therapist recommended for dealing with this was stand-up comedy. So they enrolled me in the San Francisco Young Comedians program, and I started doing lots of local stand-up comedy, did shows, did a couple of variety pieces, and kept that up until well into my 20s.
And so at what point, because I know that you paid for part or all of your undergraduate degree writing Harlequin romances. So at what point did you start to transition from performing to still performing, but in front of your computer for an audience reaction later, I suppose?
So there is a concept in stand-up comedy. It's called working blue. This podcast does not work blue, and so I'm not going to give you an example, but it's basically doing extremely profane and frequently sexually charged material. So a lot of things that no one's parents want me saying right now, including my own, quite honestly. And I did not, I started publishing in 2009, and that seems really recent, but in internet years, it was a millennia ago. Social media was a baby when I first started publishing. I'm not certain when Facebook came out, but I'm actually Googling it right now. So Facebook was first created in 2004. So it was about 5 years old. It was still small. Facebook was still that thing that your grandma did and tried to get you to join so that she could see pictures of the grandbabies. It was not a standard thing that you could just go online and find everything about everyone and where they were going to be. So I did not cross-promote my stand-up work with my books. I didn't want them contaminating each other, as it were. And while only the books under the A. Deborah Baker name are actually written for a middle grade audience and intended for kids to read, I try to make sure that everything I do is safe for kids like the kid I was. I was watching horror movies already. I had heard some swear words. I knew that sometimes if you fight with a blob monster, you get dissolved. But I didn't want to read sexy books, and I didn't want to read books that really lingered on some of those things. So I tend to view all of my work as suitable for 12 and up, even if some of it is very much not meant for 12 and up and would not necessarily be every 12-year-old's cup of tea. Nothing is everyone's cup of tea. So there's not a huge amount of swearing. There's not graphic sex. There's none of that stuff in my written work. Well, I was doing a local stand-up show. I had been called in at the last minute because one of their headliners had to drop out. And so they needed someone who was enough of a name that people wouldn't feel like they had been rooked out of the cost of their ticket, but was not such a big deal that they would demand a lot of money or concessions from the venue. So I wound up being on the marquee of this little San Francisco comedy club at the last minute. Didn't say anything about it online. There wasn't time. And still somehow a couple of my readers found out about it. And they came to the show. And after the show, in the lobby, they were just horrified. They came up to me and they were literally revolted by the things that I had said. After we're done with recording, I can give you the names of the routines I did. Stand-up comedy is usually divided into bits. So you'll have the bit about the shark, or the bit that you call That Time I Went to San Diego. The titles of these bits will explain to you why these people were so upset. But, you know, they thought of me as kind of a renegade Disney princess. And then they came to this thing, and I'm saying this absolutely horrible stuff. And the room is laughing, and I'm clearly very happy. And they were just really upset. And I stopped that night and went, I have been doing stand-up comedy for 15 years. For more than 15 years. I have been doing stand-up comedy for a long time. And I have not broken out. I haven't had that routine that gets you the stand-up comedy special on Netflix. I haven't had my own Douglas. I either need to buckle down and become a stand-up comic, like really work and become the stand-up comic I want to be, or I need to stop because it is not compatible with the books I want to write and the stories I want to tell. So at that point, I just stopped. That was the last headline show I ever did.
No, in all fairness, I just saw you absolutely murder it. I think it was the 2019 National Book Awards, where you were in front of a mic, and you know there was quite a bit. I mean, not a prepared routine, obviously, but there was quite a bit of humor. You made me laugh. I heard the audience laughing, and I've seen you present elsewhere. And of course, obviously, your books have quite a bit of some of your books. You've written so many that they have all kinds of things, but some of your books have quite a bit of humor in them as well. So I'm assuming that stand-up comedy base still comes in handy for you.
Oh, absolutely. And part of my stand-up comedy training involved a lot of improv, which is where things like the National Book Awards really play in. It's not the same as stand-up comedy, even though you use a lot of the same techniques and a lot of the same skills.